Today I want to talk about a pretty serious topic, suicide. Last year in 2017, there were 44,193 suicide deaths. It's no joke. I have never attempted suicide. The closest I came to doing so was back in high school. I was in a terribly low mood, thinking I'd never find love, that I was worthless, ugly, and that life had no meaning. I went as far as pulling out a knife, but I put it back. One might wonder why I didn't go through with it, and to answer that, I have to talk a little bit about philosophy. I was deep into Eastern philosophy, at least for someone in high school, especially the samurai code of Bushido. There is value in life, but also in death. There is no taboo about suicide like there is in the West. In fact, it was a natural result to events in your life, but it comes down to the meaning of one's death. I will freely admit that I bastardized the Bushido code when I was younger, and I took what I wanted. One thing I took was that this meaning in death. Death is not to be feared, but your death also shouldn't be meaningless. I convinced myself that suicide was a meaningless death, and that's what stayed in my hand that day. The idea that your death should have meaning has stayed with me even to this day. I've still had suicide ideations since that day of realization. I've had them as recently as this year. They were usually stray thoughts like what would happen if I drove off that cliff, or why not let that train hit me, or drive into that semi truck. It's scary stuff. To think that you could so easily end your life at the flick of a wrist, it's one reason I will probably never own a handgun. It would be too easy to kill myself. All it takes is a few seconds of no restraint and bam, you're dead. With a handgun, it's as easy as pulling a trigger and it's all over. It's not like other forms of suicide, such as pills or cutting, where it's a long, drawn-out ordeal and can be reversed if it's caught soon enough. There is a finality with a gun that you can find nowhere else. If I had owned a gun back in 2012, I might not be here. I had been having a fling with a lovely young woman who I fell in love with. The problem was she didn't return those feelings. I got a text that she wanted to move on and I probably wouldn't see her again, and I was devastated. I did everything I could to take my mind off her, but nothing helped. I felt like I wanted to die. I took a bath, I tried to relax, but it didn't help. I put on social media that I wanted to die, and then I held my breath, and I ducked under the water, but I wasn't really trying to drown myself. But I came close. If I had a gun, I might have held that up to my head and put my finger under the trigger, and who knows what would have happened. Thankfully, I had some friends reach out to me and invited me over to their place. I got out of the bath, got dressed, and drove over there. I was in good company, but it was nice to be around people at that point. I went for a walk and talked about what was on my mind, and it put me in a better place. I wasn't happy, and I wouldn't be again for a while, but the pain of the moment had passed. If it wasn't for medication, I might still be having suicidal ideations. My medication stabilizes my mood, and while it isn't stabilized on a higher emotional arc, it does keep me from dipping back into the suicide zone, which I'm thankful for. It's rather stressful to be periodically thinking about ending one's life. The last time I had thoughts of suicide were back in June of this year. It's a fact that when a celebrity commits suicide, there is an increase in suicides. I'd never paid attention to this statistic until Anthony Bourdain died. That hit me pretty hard. It's only the second celebrity death that I personally felt a loss over. It's hard to explain how he touched my life, but I'd lived with his shows for years, rewatching them frequently. In fact, I had just finished watching a series of episodes of Parts Unknown in an effort to research places to visit in Europe the day before I had heard the news of his death. I was devastated, but it put me into a really low place. It made me wonder what the purpose of life was. If someone as accomplished as him didn't want to live, why was my life important? Why should I live? It's scary thinking how much his death touched me. It wasn't until then that I knew how much a celebrity's death could affect someone. I fully acknowledge that when it comes to suicidal thoughts, there are people who have it a lot worse than me. I know people who have attempted suicide, and I know people who have died from suicide. I'm thankful that I was able to find a reason to not follow in their footsteps. It's a personal journey that can't be replicated, no matter how much I wish the lessons I learned to avoid killing myself would empower others to avoid suicide too. I know that's not how it works. Hopefully, my story will touch someone and maybe save a life. If not, maybe it will at least help someone who has never suffered from suicidal ideations to better understand someone who has. All I gotta say is fuck depression. Be good.